You're tired. Not the kind of tired that a good night's sleep fixes. I'm talking about the deeper kind. The kind that's already there when you open your eyes in the morning, before the alarm, before the coffee, before the list of things you already know you're not going to finish today. You're not burned out because you worked too hard. You're burned out because you've been carrying something that was never supposed to be carried alone. And somewhere along the way, you started believing that pushing through the exhaustion was the same thing as being strong. It's not. Here's what nobody tells you after 40. The old strategies stop working. The hustle mentality, the just discipline yourself approach, the motivational speeches, they all start to feel like someone handing you a map to a city that no longer exists. So you do what feels honest. You slow down. You sit. You stare at what needs to be done. And you wonder if something is wrong with you. Nothing is wrong with you. But something does need to change. And it starts with understanding something so simple, so ancient, that most people walk right past it every single day. Stay with me. Let me ask you something honest. When was the last time you did something, really did something, and felt completely present while doing it? Not distracted, not half there, not running through tomorrow's problems while trying to finish today's work. If you have to think hard to remember, you're not alone. Because here's what I've come to understand after years of watching people, including myself, struggle with productivity, with motivation, with that invisible wall that shows up exactly when we need to move most. The enemy isn't tiredness. The enemy is disconnection. We live in an age that has perfected the art of keeping us busy while keeping us empty. Notifications, obligations, opinions, noise, all of it designed, consciously or not, to fragment your attention into pieces so small that nothing ever gets your full self anymore. Not your work, not your relationships, not even your prayers. And when a human being operates in that fragmented state long enough, something quietly shuts down inside. Not dramatically. No collapse, no breakdown. Just a slow, gray dimming. Like a light that doesn't go out. It just stops being bright. You still function. You still show up. You still answer emails and make dinner and say you're fine when people ask. But inside, you're running on something close to empty. And here's the cruel irony of that state. The things that would actually restore you, silence, reflection, meaningful work, genuine rest, those are exactly the things that feel most impossible to reach when you're depleted. So you reach for what's easy instead. You scroll. You snack. You watch one more episode. You tell yourself you'll start fresh on Monday. And Monday comes, and the weight is still there. Maybe heavier now, wrapped in a thin layer of guilt that makes everything just a little bit harder. Sound familiar? I'm not saying this to make you feel seen in a cheap, manipulative way. I'm saying it because this cycle has a name. And more importantly, it has an exit. But to find the exit, we need to go back further than most productivity coaches are willing to go. We need to go back to something the ancient world understood that we, in all our efficiency and optimization, have almost completely forgotten. The Greeks had a word, and I want you to hold on to this word, acedia. It's often translated as sloth, but that translation does it a disservice. Acedia wasn't laziness. It wasn't even depression in the modern clinical sense. It was something the Desert Fathers, those ancient Christian monks who retreated into silence to understand the human soul, described as a spiritual heaviness, a noonday darkness, a state where the soul loses its appetite for the things that matter most. They called it the most dangerous of all the interior enemies, not because it made you do terrible things, but because it made you stop doing the good things. It didn't destroy you loudly. It dissolved you quietly. And when I first read about acedia, I stopped, because I recognized it. Not in some abstract theological way. I recognized it in my own chest, in the way I would sit down to do meaningful work and feel nothing. In the way I would look at a task I genuinely cared about and feel a strange, inexplicable resistance, like trying to walk through water. Have you felt that? That specific resistance, not to hard things, but to the things you actually value? That's not laziness. That's not weakness. That's something much older, much more human. And this is the part that changed everything for me. Something that has a real, ancient, tested answer. And that answer doesn't start with a better morning routine. It starts with understanding what you're actually made of. Because you are not a machine that needs better fuel. You are not a system that needs better optimization. You are a human being. Body, mind, and something deeper than both. And when you ignore any one of those three, the whole thing starts to break down in ways that no planner, no habit tracker, and no motivational video can fix. This is where we need to go next. And I promise you, if you stay with me through this, you're going to walk away with something that actually lasts, not a trick, not a hack, a shift. The kind that happens quietly, in the deep places, and changes everything from the inside out. There's a conversation I keep coming back to. Not from a podcast, not from a best-selling book, from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 6. Jesus has just lost John the Baptist, his cousin, his forerunner, a man he loved. And immediately after hearing the news, the crowds find him. Thousands of them, needing things, asking things, pulling at him from every direction. And what does he do? He turns to his disciples and says something so simple it almost disappears. Come away by yourselves to a desolate place and rest a while. No sermon on resilience, no 5-step framework. Just come away, rest a while. This is the Son of God, in the middle of grief, in the middle of an overwhelming workload. And his response is not to push harder. His response is to withdraw. Now, if you're not a person of faith, stay with me, because what I'm pointing to goes beyond theology. It touches something universal that modern productivity culture has completely inverted. We have been sold a story. A very convincing, very American story. More output requires more input. If you're falling behind, speed up. And for a while, usually in your 20s, sometimes into your 30s, that story seems to work. You grind, you climb, the results come. And you take that as confirmation that the story is true. But then something shifts. The grind stops producing the same results. You work just as hard, maybe harder, and the output feels thinner. The meaning feels thinner. You wonder if something is wrong with you. You're not wearing out. You're waking up. Because what's actually happening, beneath the fatigue, beneath the resistance, is that your soul is refusing to be treated like a machine any longer. And that refusal deserves your respect, not your contempt. Here's what I mean. You are not two things, a mind and a body. You are three. Every serious philosophical and theological tradition in human history, from Aristotle to Augustine, from the Hebrew scriptures to the Stoics, understood that the human person operates on three levels simultaneously. There is the body, the physical self that needs sleep, movement, sunlight, and rest. We understand this one, even if we don't always honor it. There is the mind, the rational self that plans, analyzes, creates. We worship this one in the modern world. We optimize it, supplement it, hack it, track it. And then there is the third, the one most people in the 21st century have almost no language for anymore. Call it the soul. Call it the spirit. Call it the deep self. But whatever you call it, it's real, it's primary, and it is the source from which everything else flows. The ancient Christians called it the pneuma. The Greeks called it the psyche in its deepest sense. The Hebrew tradition called it the neshama, the breath of God breathed into the first human being, the thing that made dust into a living soul. And here's what every one of those traditions agreed on. When the deep self is starved, nothing else works right. Not the mind, not the body, not the will, not the productivity system, nothing, because the deep self is not downstream of your habits. Your habits are downstream of your deep self. Read that again. Your capacity to act, your daily capacity to get out of bed and do the thing and keep going, does not come primarily from discipline. It comes from meaning, from connection, from a sense, however quiet, that what you are doing matters and that you are not alone in doing it. When that sense is alive, even dimly, you can do extraordinary things. History is full of people who were exhausted, who had every reason to stop, and didn't. Not because they were more disciplined than you, but because something inside them was lit. And when that sense goes dark, even simple things feel impossible. This is not weakness. This is physics. You cannot draw water from an empty well, and no amount of willpower or motivational content will refill what can only be refilled at the source. So the real question, the one we've been circling since the beginning, is not, how do I get more done when I'm tired? The real question is, what has been draining me at the deepest level? And what does restoration actually look like? That's where we're going next. And the answer is closer, quieter, and more available than you think. There's a particular kind of pain that doesn't have a name in English. The Portuguese call it saudade, a longing for something you can't quite identify, a homesickness for a place you're not sure you've ever been. And I bring this up not to be poetic, but because it describes something real that a lot of people over 40 carry without ever being able to articulate. You've built things. You've survived things. You have a life that, from the outside, looks like it should feel like enough. And yet, there's this quiet ache, a sense that somewhere in the middle of all the building and surviving, you lost contact with something essential. Something that used to feed you in a way that nothing on your current calendar seems to anymore. That's not a midlife crisis. That's not ingratitude. That's thirst. And the tragedy is that we live in a world that offers us 10,000 things to drink that are not water. And we consume them desperately, one after another, and wonder why we're still thirsty. Most people above 40 who are quietly struggling with this kind of fatigue have not stopped working. They've stopped wondering. Think about that. When you were younger, I don't care how pragmatic you were, there was a version of you that asked big questions. Questions about meaning, about purpose, about what kind of person you wanted to become and why. Questions about God, about what happens after, about what you were here for. And at some point, life got loud enough that those questions got pushed to the back. Not answered, pushed back. Filed under later. And later became a very long time ago. When a person stops asking the deep questions, they don't become more productive. They become more mechanical. They don't move faster, they move emptier. And eventually, that emptiness starts to feel like exhaustion. Because it is exhaustion. The exhaustion of a soul running on the surface for too long, desperate for depth. Blaise Pascal wrote something in the 17th century that has never stopped haunting me. He said that all of humanity's problems stem from the inability to sit quietly in a room alone. Underneath that provocation is something searingly true. The reason we compulsively fill every silence, the reason we reach for the phone before our feet hit the floor, is not because we love noise. It's because we're afraid of what we'd hear in the quiet. And what would you hear? Honestly, you'd hear yourself. The real self. The one underneath the role you've performed for so long, it feels like your own face. You'd hear the questions you've been avoiding, the grief you haven't processed, the dreams you quietly buried because the timing was never right. You'd hear the voice that has been trying to reach you for years. Some of you know exactly what I mean. And some of you are uncomfortable right now. Good. Don't run from it. Because here's what I know about that voice. It is not an enemy. It is the most reliable guide you have ever had access to. The reason your to-do list feels like a wall instead of a road is not that you lack discipline or the right system. It's that you've been trying to move forward while ignoring the only voice that knows where forward actually is. The ancient Christians had a practice called Lectio Divina, sacred reading. Not reading for information, reading for encounter. Slow, deliberate, receptive, where the goal was not to consume the text, but to be changed by it. I think about that practice in contrast to how we consume content today. We scroll at the speed of anxiety. We listen at 1.5 speed. We read summaries of books we'll never open. We are drowning in information and starving for wisdom. Wisdom is slow. Wisdom requires stillness. Wisdom asks you to sit with a question long enough that it starts to do something to you, not just to your thinking, but to your actual being. And here is the practical truth that connects all of this to your Monday morning. You will never consistently do meaningful work from a depleted soul. But when you return to the well, when you reconnect, even imperfectly, with the deep source of who you are, something shifts. The resistance softens. The work starts to feel like it belongs to you again. That shift doesn't start with a new habit. It starts with a decision to stop running from the quiet. Let me tell you about a morning that changed me. Not a dramatic morning, just an ordinary Tuesday about 6 years ago, during one of the most productive-looking and internally hollow seasons of my life. Projects, plans, momentum, all of it pointing forward. And I woke up that morning, sat on the edge of the bed, and felt absolutely nothing. Not sad, not anxious, just absent. Like I had left myself somewhere and couldn't remember where. And instead of doing what I always did, reaching for the phone, opening the laptop, manufacturing motion to avoid the stillness, I just sat there. Maybe I was too tired to reach. Maybe something in me had finally given up on the performance. I sat there for about 20 minutes. Something happened in those 20 minutes that I still don't have perfect language for. It wasn't a vision. It wasn't an emotional breakthrough. It was quieter. More like a returning. Like a part of me that had been waiting just outside the door finally walked back in and sat down. When I got up and went to my desk, I worked differently. Not faster. With more presence. With a quality of attention I hadn't felt in months. Here's what I believe happened. I stopped performing and started being. That shift, from performing to being, is the most underrated, least discussed productivity practice of our time. From the moment most of us wake up, we are in performance mode, managing how we appear, how we're progressing, how we compare, performing a version of ourselves curated for a relentless audience. It follows us into the bathroom, into the car, into the 10 minutes before sleep, when we should be resting, but we're actually reviewing the day and planning tomorrow's show. That is exhausting in a way that sleep cannot fix. Because the exhaustion isn't physical. It's the exhaustion of not being yourself for so long that you've forgotten what yourself actually feels like. The practice I'm talking about, the one nobody in the productivity space wants to discuss because it doesn't scale, it doesn't trend, it has no 30-day challenge, is simply this: daily return to the self. A deliberate, protected, non-negotiable period. 20 minutes, 15 if that's all you have, where you stop producing, stop consuming, stop performing, and simply exist in the presence of what is most real. For me, that means prayer. Sitting with Scripture not as information to extract, but as a living word that finds me where I am. Silence that is not empty, but full. Full of the kind of attention that only emerges when everything else goes quiet. For you, the form may look different, but the essence must be the same. Still, honest, free from output and agenda. And it must happen before the performance begins, before the phone, before the inbox, before the first obligation claims your attention. The Jesuit tradition calls this the examen, a daily practice of reflective prayer. Not reviewing your productivity, but your interiority. Where were you most alive today? Where did you feel most like yourself? Not therapy. Archaeology. Digging beneath the surface to find what's actually down there. The days that begin with that kind of inner contact are categorically different from the days that don't. Not because I have more energy. Not because the list is shorter. Because I am more present. And presence, real, grounded, unperformed presence, is the single most powerful thing you can bring to your work. Think about the people in your life who get the most done. Not the busiest. The busiest are often the least effective. The people who move through work with quiet authority, who make decisions clearly, who finish things. Those people have some form of daily inner practice, some way of returning to themselves before the world gets its hands on them. It doesn't have to look religious. It doesn't have to be long or perfect. Some mornings, it's just sitting in the dark with a cup of coffee and being honest with God about how tired I am. But it has to be real. Because here is what this entire conversation has been building toward. You are not tired because you lack motivation. You are tired because you have been living at a level of shallowness that your soul was never designed for. The way back is not through more effort at the surface. The way back is down. Down into the quiet. Down into the honest. Down into the place where the real you lives, the one who knows why you're here, who has not given up even when the performing self has run completely out of steam. That self is not gone. It's waiting. And it's closer than you think. Let me get practical with you now. Everything we've talked about, the acedia, the disconnection, the return to the deep self, has to eventually land somewhere concrete. It has to touch your actual Tuesday, your actual inbox, your actual life with its demands that are not going to pause while you figure this out. So let me talk about architecture. Not the architecture of a perfect day. I don't believe in perfect days. I'm talking about the architecture of an honest day. Structured not around maximum output, but around sustainable presence. Built for a human being, not a productivity algorithm. It starts with a principle that sounds almost embarrassingly simple until you try to live it. You cannot give what you do not have. That's the whole framework. Everything else is application. If you begin your day already in deficit, already reactive, already fragmented, everything you produce that day carries that deficit inside it. Your emails will be slightly off, your decisions slightly clouded, your conversations slightly absent. By 3 p.m, you'll be staring at the wall, wondering why you feel like you ran a marathon without moving. But if you begin with even a brief period of genuine inner contact, with yourself, with what is most real, you bring something different into everything that follows. Not perfection, just presence. And presence compounds. Here's what the architecture actually looks like. The first hour belongs to you. Not to your phone, not to email, not to notifications or the demands of other people. The first hour belongs to the inner life. This is non-negotiable. This is the well. This is where you drink before you pour. For me, this means prayer, scripture, and silence, not as religious performance, as a genuine conversation with the source of everything I am. Some mornings it's profound. Most mornings it's just faithful. And faithfulness, over time, does something that inspiration never can. For you, it might look different, but it must be yours. Protected, and it must come before the world's agenda replaces your own. Second principle, work in the direction of meaning, not urgency. Urgency is a tyrant, loud, insistent, and almost always a liar. The urgent things present themselves as the most important, but they rarely are. They are simply the loudest. Dallas Willard said something that stopped me cold. Hurry is the great enemy of spiritual life in our day. When you move through work in a state of hurry, you are not present to it. You are processing it, checking it off, getting through it, and work that is merely gotten through produces results that feel empty even when technically correct. So before you open anything, before you respond to anything, identify the one thing that matters most today. Not the most urgent, the most meaningful. The thing that, if done with full presence, would make today count regardless of everything else. Do that thing first, with your best attention. Everything else is secondary. Third principle, rest is not the reward for finishing. Rest is the condition for continuing. You are not supposed to earn your rest. The Protestant work ethic has been so badly distorted in our culture that we have turned rest into a luxury, a weakness, or a reward for the sufficiently productive. And that distortion is quietly killing people. The Sabbath was not given as a reward for a productive week. It was built into the structure of creation itself. The first thing declared holy was not a temple, not a law. A day of rest. Because the God who made you knew something the productivity industry will never admit. You are not designed for continuous output. You are designed for rhythm, work and rest, effort and stillness, giving and receiving. Violate that rhythm long enough, and the system doesn't just slow down, it breaks down in ways very hard to reverse. Rest is architecture. It is the space inside the music that makes the notes make sense. Build it in deliberately. A walk, a silence, a meal without a screen, a conversation with no agenda. These are not indulgences. These are the things that keep the light on. And finally, do the work in front of you as if it matters eternally. Because it might. The monk who sweeps the floor with complete attention is not wasting his contemplative life. He is living it. And the person who answers the email, makes the call, has the hard conversation, with presence, with care, with the full weight of who they actually are. That person is not just being productive. That person is being human. Fully, gloriously, unrepeatable human. And that is what you were made for. Before I go any further, and I mean this genuinely, not as a scripted moment, if you've made it here, I want you to know something. Most people don't. Most people click away in the first 2 minutes, looking for the quick answer, the shortcut, the 3-step fix. When they realize this is going to ask something more of them, they leave. You didn't leave. That tells me something about you. So I want to ask you directly, if what you've heard today has touched something, if it has named something you've been carrying without language for it, I want to invite you to stay connected. Subscribe to this channel. Turn on the notification. Come back tomorrow and the day after. Because what we do here is not content, it's conversation. The kind that used to happen on front porches and in churches and on long road trips with someone you trusted completely. And if you know someone quietly exhausted and quietly pretending they're fine, share this with them. Not because the algorithm needs it, because they might need it more than they know how to say. This is the kind of video you send at 11 p.m. with no message attached. They'll understand. Now, stay with me. Because we're not done. Everything we've built, the acedia, the disconnection, the architecture, the return to the well, it all leads to a question I think is the most important one we haven't asked yet. What are you actually afraid of? Not the surface fear. Beneath every pattern of avoidance, beneath every wall of resistance, beneath every inexplicable inability to just do the thing, there is a deeper fear. And for most people over 40, it sounds something like this. What if I do everything right, and it still doesn't matter? What if I build the discipline, return to the quiet, do the meaningful work, and at the end of it, the life still feels small? I want to speak directly to that fear. Because it's the real reason so many capable, sincere people stay stuck. not because they don't know what to do, but because some part of them has quietly concluded that doing it won't be enough. That conclusion is a lie, an understandable lie, the kind that forms in the gap between what you hoped your life would look like by now and what it actually looks like. It feels like truth because it's wrapped in your own voice. But it's not truth. It's exhaustion speaking. It's acedia speaking. The noonday darkness the Desert Fathers warned about. The voice that says nothing will change, nothing matters. You've already missed it. That voice has been wrong about every single person it has ever spoken to, including you. Here is what I know, not as optimism, but as something I have seen and staked my own life on. It is never too late to return, not to some idealized version of the life you should have lived, to the actual life still in front of you, the one that begins not when circumstances improve, but the moment you decide to be present to it. The prodigal son in Luke 15 didn't return because he had a plan. The text says something devastating in its simplicity. He came to himself. He came to himself. That's the turn. That's always the turn. Not a breakthrough, not a revelation, just a moment of coming back to what is most true about who you are. And what happened when he turned? The Father saw him while he was still a long way off, ran to him, didn't wait for the apology or the explanation, just ran. I'm not going to tell you what that means for your theology. You're old enough to work that out yourself. But I will tell you what it means for your Monday morning. It means the return is always available. Every morning, every hour, every moment you catch yourself performing instead of being, rushing instead of present, the return is available. The well is still there. The water is still real. The distance between where you are and where you need to be is not measured in miles. It's measured in a single, honest, turning step. That step doesn't require energy you don't have. It requires only this: the willingness to stop, to be honest, to turn, and then to take the very next small action in front of you. Not the whole list, not the whole transformation, just the next thing, with presence, with intention, with the full weight of who you actually are, because that is how the exhausted move. Not in dramatic surges of renewed motivation, but in small, faithful present steps that accumulate into something that, looked back upon from a distance, will look like a life well lived. There's an image I keep coming back to. A man standing at a window. Early morning. The house is still quiet. The coffee is warm in his hands. The day hasn't started yet. The demands, the noise, the performance, none of it has begun. And for just a moment, in that thin space between sleep and the world, he is simply himself. Not a father performing fatherhood. Not a professional performing competence. Not a man performing strength. Just himself. And in that moment, brief, unguarded, unremarkable, he feels something he hasn't felt in a long time. Not happiness exactly. Something quieter. Something more like rightness. Like the peace of being exactly where you are supposed to be. Doing exactly what you are supposed to be doing, which in this moment is nothing more than standing at a window with warm coffee, watching the light change. I think that man is who you actually are, underneath everything. Not the exhausted version, not the behind on everything version, not the one who opens the laptop with a low-grade dread so familiar it no longer registers as dread, just as normal. The window version, the quiet version, the one who knows, without needing to be told, that life is good and that the day ahead, however difficult, is also somehow a gift. That version of you has not disappeared. He has just been waiting for you to slow down long enough to let him back in. We started this conversation with tiredness, the kind that accumulates in the soul when a person lives too long at the surface. too long in the performance, too long running on urgency that our culture celebrates and your body is quietly rejecting. We talked about acedia, the soul's loss of appetite for what matters, about the 3 dimensions of the human person and what happens when the deepest one is starved, about the well you stopped drinking from, about the architecture of a day built for a human being, and about the turn, that available at any moment decision to stop performing and start being. And now I want to leave you with something. Not a summary, not action items, a question. Sit with it the way you'd sit with a fire on a cold night. Let it warm something that has been cold for a while. What would you do tomorrow? What would you actually do if you genuinely believed the life in front of you was still full of possibility? Not the life you should have had. This one, with its actual constraints and its actual history and its actual unrepeatable days. What would you do if you believed that? The tiredness you feel is not evidence that you are too late. It is evidence that you have been trying to live a meaningful life without the one thing that makes it possible. Connection. Real, deep, sustained, to yourself, to others, to God, to the work that is actually yours to do. And the moment that connection begins to be restored, even partially, even in a single quiet morning with 20 minutes of honest silence, everything changes. Not dramatically, but really. The list stops being a wall. The work starts to feel like it belongs to you. The day opens up in a way that has everything to do with how present you are to it. This is not self-help. This is something much older. The ancient wisdom every serious tradition has pointed toward for thousands of years, that the human being is not a producer, not a performer, not a system to be optimized, is a soul, made for connection, made for meaning, made for work that participates in something eternal. And that soul, your soul, is not broken. It's just thirsty. Tonight, before you sleep, find 5 minutes of real quiet. No podcast, no screen, just quiet. And ask yourself honestly, what have I been running from? What would it look like to stop running, just for today? That's the whole assignment. And leave a comment. A real one. Tell me where this landed. What it named that you didn't have words for. And tell me, what do you want to talk about next? What question are you carrying that nobody has addressed honestly? I read every comment. The next video may come directly from what you write below. And as for that man at the window, he puts down his coffee. He takes a breath. And he begins.